Hello, my friends. John LaRuffa here with another straight up solo. And in this episode, we're going to take a look at Marvel Champions, the card game. I'm going to show you what this game is like from a solo perspective. I'm also going to compare it to a few other LCGs that I've played over the years and give you a perspective of what I think about it. And maybe is it worth you owning if you have some other soloable LCGs from Fantasy Flight. Let's take a look. And as usual, folks, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. So instead of playing through some turns, I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview of the game in a little bit different way, just describing a bunch of different situations and kind of things that play out in this game. The way the game works is you will have a player phase, okay? And a player phase is where you do all of your different actions. At the end of your actions being a solo, you move right into this kind of reset situation here where you're going to discard cards, drop your hand, ready all of your people. Then the villain is going to do their stuff, okay? And it's actually pretty simple. The flow of the game is pretty simple, which I like. Just like any other LCG, there are a host of different terms and situations and all of the stuff that you have seen before in other LCGs. But I do find this one seems a little bit more intuitive, which I like. And so that's kind of nice. But so just like any other setup that you've had, you'll see that there's a lot of similarities here with some previous games that Fantasy Flight has done. Probably one of the most close ones is the Lord of the Rings LCG, but you see they picked up other elements and have streamlined some things. You know, they took a little bit of stuff from some of their other games. And I'll also compare this to Arkham Horror LCG also, because that game has some loose similarities to this one, but really is its own different beast, if you will. So what's going to happen? You got your hero here, okay? And you can play with any hero you want. If you wanted, you could play two-handed and play two heroes and two decks, but I think this game actually works well as a solo without having to do that. So one deck seems to be sufficient. And just like the other ones, you have a draw deck here. It consists between 40 and 50 cards. The deck building rules are pretty easy. You have cards that must go in the deck depending on the hero you've placed. Then you get to pick any number of these neutral cards you want. And then you get to pick any number of one of four different types. In this case, I'm using aggression, but there's also a justice, a restorative, I think it's called, or protection, and then another one which is leadership. And so those four suits are similar in style, I guess I would say, to some of the Lord of the Rings kind of thing. You know, they had a leadership deck there. They had kind of an attack style deck. I can't remember the name. It's been a while. But that was kind of similar to the aggression deck. Then they had the spirit deck, which is a lot like the leadership. And then they had the lore deck, which is like the, I think it's the restorative. I have to look at it here. It always skips my mind. But anyway, the point is there's four decks. And they definitely have different feels to them, and the cards in them definitely feel like you are going protection. That's what it is, protection deck. Definitely feel like they sound. Okay, on your turn, you're going to play cards. If you have to play a card, or if you play a card, you have to pay the cost. The cost is up here, and it could be paid with any number of these icons equal to this. So the cost itself, at least in the cards that I have from the base game and from a couple of the first release packs, basically don't call for anything special here. It's like if I need to pay this card, I got to come up with three other cards that have one symbol or more. Maybe I can do it with some of these cards. We'll have two symbols on them instead of one. But basically, that's kind of what you're doing. You're discarding cards for your resources from your hand to put things out. And you'll have event cards, which are once and dones. You'll have the upgrade cards, which can upgrade your hero or your allies. You'll have support cards that work on their own. And you have all that. You also have the ally cards, which can attack or thwart, which I'll talk to you about in a second. And they take residual damage or damage at the same time, basically, with, it's not residual damage, I can't remember the name, but basically you get damage as you are attacking here. So it's kind of the way they handle a little bit of this stuff, which I think works just fine. And then the other thing that's kind of cool is that your hero has an alter ego side, which is kind of like their normal day non-superhero side. Although, you know, good old Odin, son, and Thor, right? They're both pretty superhero-like. But the fact of the matter is that when you're in your alter ego, what you can do and the different actions you play are only alter ego actions. So if it says hero action, then you can only do it when you're in hero form, or if it says alter ego action like this, then you have to be in alter ego form. Plus, this is how you can restore health, which is kind of cool. Additionally, depending on which side you are on, the boss and the minions will either attack you when you're in superhero form, and the attack is just like it sounds, just like the usual card games where you can bring in other people to block, or you can defend yourself and exhaust your character to do so, etc. Or if you're in the side like this, they scheme, and when they scheme, they try to advance these decks through. And just like you know, LCGs that Fantasy Flight has done before, as these things advance, you go to different stages, and if it gets through all the way through there, you lose. Also, if the boss kills you, you lose. In order to win the game, unlike Arkham Horror or unlike the Lord of the Rings card game, you're not trying to accomplish things over here. You're basically preventing these things from happening. You can remove some of these side schemes by getting the threat tokens off of them, or the scheme tokens off of them. And you can kind of reduce this back to nominal, so to speak, by taking them off to extend the game. But it's all about killing him, the bad guy, all right? The bad guy. The bad guy will have two stages. If you're playing on the normal stage, it'll be stage 1, which have a certain amount of health points per character, and then stage 2, which have a little more health points per character. If you're playing on hard, you go to stage 2 and then stage 3, which has even more difficult stuff. And I could tell you guys, this game seems pretty tough as it is. I've beaten the introductory boss, the Rhino, once, and then I started playing against Ultron, I started playing against the Claw, haven't won since. So there is certainly a solid challenge in this game without having to step it up. That being said, it does not seem impossible to win. Some of the wins some of the situations was like, oh, if it had gone a little bit differently, I could have done different things, and that would have stopped the crushing situation. All right. So after you do your events and you attack and you exhaust like most of these kinds of games, you will come back to an unexhausted state at the end of your turn. You will draw back up to your hand size. And your hand size is different depending on which side of card you're in. So his hand size in Thor is 4. His hand size is 5 in Odin's son. So that changes things a little bit. And you're always going to be using cards as resources. So I like that it streamlines that. So you got a little bit of tension about, I want to play this card, or do I want to spend it for resources? But also, it seems like, you're able to, you have to play so many resource cards out there like the Lord of the Rings did, where you're generating different things and it takes longer to do things. It seems like you're moving through your deck a lot faster. So much, in fact, that in a normal game, you're probably going to get through most, if not all, the deck at least once, and actually shuffle back in, take a treachery card, and get through it again. And the same thing here. This is going to go through potentially once or twice. And I like that, because one of my beefs about other LCGs from Fantasy Flight, especially the Lord of the Rings one, is I know you can do things with different builds and stuff, etc., but I never seemed to get through my whole deck. It would always get like halfway and that would be it. So I like the fact that you're churning through your cards a little faster. That means that when you put something in your deck, there's more of a likelihood that you're going to actually draw that card. And I think that is good. I like that. And that's all a function of the fact that you're discarding cards to pay for cards. Okay? The other thing that I appreciate about this game compared to other ones is it does seem a bit more straightforward. And that is not a problem. It doesn't mean it's less complex. It just seems like it's just more understandable. It isn't as intricate. There's not as many twists and turns. And if you love twists and turns, then Arkham Horror, the card game, is for you, right? That one is new every time you play a new scenario. It's all brand new rules. It's all brand new situations. It's very narrative driven. It's very dense and tough to play because of that. I say that's one of the most complicated games I have, from the specific reason that not only do you have to learn all of the tropes, but you also have to understand each scenario, how to play. It's almost like learning a mini game every single time, which is great if you want that, but exhausting if you just want to play something that that you know a little better. And so that's what I like about this one. It is much more approachable, I think, from a standpoint of an LCG. And that does not mean it's simple. It does not mean it's dumbed down. It just means it's more straightforward. Every time so far, I've had to kill the boss, right? And maybe things in different packs will introduce different mechanics along the way. But for right now, that's where we are. And I like that. The other thing I like about the game, and that I want to explain, is that the deck you play, the hero you play, is definitely different and unique depending on who you're playing. It's not just like it was in the Lord of the Rings, for instance, where Lord of the Rings, you had some different heroes and such, but it was so much about what you built around the deck, right? In this game, your hero definitely determines how the play style is going to be. So with Odin, or with Thor, his cards are all about defeating minions and bringing minions in and beating them up and thwarting the schemes like that and doing other things. And I think that is cool. Way different than some of the other cards, other heroes that I have, where they'd be all about, like, for instance, setting traps or trying to get the enemy to walk into a response, and then the response does something that's different. Or maybe somebody, like Iron Man, where you're trying to power them up with different upgrades. And as you do that, you become really, really, really strong. But if you don't have that upgrade power up, you're kind of weak. So they're very different. And I think that adds to the fun. The other thing about this is that it seems like you can mix and match whichever scenarios and villains and heroes that you buy at any given time. So it is not like you have to get the core pack or the different expansion packs in order. Like Arkham Horror, you had to do that. Otherwise, it was completely difficult to understand. You'd throw the whole narrative off, and it was very much like, if I can't find this specific expansion pack, I can't keep going with my game. And I thought that stunk. I understand why it works for that game, but it was just an unfortunate situation. Whereas in this game, there's really not a big narrative here. This is really much more of a comic book kind of, I'm in the situation and I'm dealing with what's going on and I'm beating the bad guys, etc. Now, the last thing I'll mention here before I give you the final thoughts up top is that each of the different heroes that you will play does have like a nemesis that comes in depending on the situation. This won't always come in, but there's a card in there that'll basically have you bust out this and then put these into the pack, and now you have another side situation that you're dealing with that you have to take down in addition to all this. So it may or may not happen, which I think is cool. It offers a little bit of differentiation and variety. And they also have these cards, which I don't think, honestly, the other ones, which are like these obligation cards, they could take it or leave it. I don't think that those are all that different. Usually they involve a little bit of story where you exhaust your hero to discard them, or do something lesser to to take it out of the game, or do something lesser to just discard it, put it back in the discard pile. It might come up again. Those, I think, were kind of unnecessary, but it doesn't matter. It's okay. They just don't offer not nearly as much of a kind of a game swing variety as something like this. And then lastly, there are a bunch of there's at least one side scheme dealt into this deck each time. So even though you're using the primary villain, whatever you're playing against, you can mix and match your side scheme in there, which really does change the feel. Those side schemes are drastically different, or at least they seem like it so far in the couple that I have. And some of them will be pumping you full of, different minions. Some of them are going to be jacking up the acceleration on the schemes and make the game go faster. Some of them have other things that happen. You're drawing more treachery cards, because when it's the villain's turn, like you can imagine, all their stuff attacks you. They do some scheming, and then, of course, just like any other LCG, you have to flip up a card, one per player, and see what happens. In this case, I got another, advanced Ultron drone, so he's going to come and engage me. But there's treachery cards in here, like this one, when revealed, etc. And by the way, I want to mention one more thing. I'm a little bit scattered. Sorry about that. But when the villain attacks you, you will draw cards from the top of the deck, and you'll reveal them, and they may have these boost icons on here, which may add, in this case, it'll add 3 to the attack damage that was played from the boss. Some of them also have not a boost, but they have this star, and then the star tells you, oh, there's something else that's going to happen. That's a cool mechanic, because that means you really don't know, and you're risking, how much do I want to, do I want to defend on this, and, waste this character action for the next round? Or do I want to take the damage? Well, when I've got a bunch of health, that's pretty much a no-brainer. But if I'm down to, like, let's say 4 or 5, okay, if I'm at 4, well, his attack is 2, right, by normal standards. But he is going to draw a boost, and a boost could push me over. I could lose the game. Or I might defend, and it's nothing. So it adds a little flavor there, which I appreciate. So overall, that's the kind of game this is. And let me give you just a couple of final thoughts, and then we'll see, what you think. Okay, so hopefully the overview that I gave you of Marvel Champions, the card game, helps you understand what type of game this is. I'll just hit on a few more things. Number one, I definitely think it plays superior as a solo or 2-player max. When I've played with more players, because literally the game is additive, the more players you put in, it just basically doubles and triples the length of the game. And that makes it from a 45-minute to an hour game into a almost 2 or almost 3-hour game. And I think that's a detractor. I think you're taking too long to play that. I know why they made it 4 players, just because they could. But to be honest, I think it's solo or 2 players. And I think solo is where it's at. The best part about solo is you can sit down, set this up fairly quickly if you have a deck built, and kind of play through the whole thing in about an hour, okay, which is great. Also, once you know what the hero is like and what the situation is like, you can mix and match them without having to really learn or really review a lot of stuff. If you can keep the system in your brain, the game rules themselves are similar from villain to villain and hero to hero. Doesn't mean the scenarios are the same, they're all different, but it doesn't mean I have to sit down and pump out the rule book and read through all the different things and this and that. I mean, it doesn't have nearly that kind of thing. And so if you found yourself exhausted with the level of continual rule learning and reading and such with our Arkham Horror LCG, this game provides kind of the counterbalance to that. There's very little of that. If you also found that the punishment of Arkham Horror was there with that bag, and that was really a punishing situation, you would be better off. I think it feels less punishing here. Yes, you're flipping these treachery cards. Yes, you're doing some different boost actions and such, but it seems like it's more controlled. You have an idea of what is going to happen. Also, you have the ability to play the cards you want to play in your hand just by spending your cards to do it. And so where in other LCGs, it's like, oh, that's a sweet card, but it's 4. Oh, it's going to take me 3 turns to make 4 resources. Here you could say, you know what? I'm going to spend all my cards to do this because I want to play this card. Even though I'm going to lose out on some other ones, I'm going to spend them all, I'm going to do it, and there we go, I can do that. And I think that is more satisfying than having to sit and hold cards for a long time while our resources generate up, or while I try to get some more charge tokens or other things, or whatever the situation may be. I got to spend turns gathering resources like Arkham Horror. All that stuff works okay in those games, but I found that I was a breath of fresh air that I didn't have to spend actions doing that this time. I didn't also have to put in a bunch of cards in my deck that would be doing just nothing but economy and stuff like that. Yes, they offer those kinds of cards here where you can draw extra ones and things, but it just doesn't seem like it's so much work to actually get my hand to activate. And then finally, my favorite thing, my favorite thing is that you can play this very satisfyingly solo. But my favorite thing about this is that you're going to see most, if not all, your deck, unless you get crushed. And I like that. I like saying that I'm building this deck, and when cards I put in there, I'm going to see. Maybe I don't see them in the exact order that I'd like to see them, because it's still a card game, but I'm not going to have to say, well, the game's over, I never even drew the cards I needed, this was a complete waste. I shouldn't say complete waste, but you know what I'm saying? If you've played those other games, you can be frustrated where the cards I needed never came up, and they're still in the deck, and I got this big deck, and I use only this much, and I felt like as far as that's concerned, probably the Lord of the Rings was the biggest challenge I found to actually get deep into your deck unless you had a specific build that lets you get there. This seems a lot more forgiving. And then finally, which I just love the asymmetric feel of each of the different heroes. I think they did a great job here. It's not just a different action on them, and some different stats. No, because you have to put in 15 of their actual cards, those cards generally flavor things completely differently than the rest of the aggression cards would, or the justice and things like that, which I really like that. So overall, I would say that this gets a big recommendation for me from a solo standpoint. If you don't like LCGs, you're not going to like this. I mean, if what I said to you didn't hit at some of the things you didn't like LCGs about, you're not going to like this. If you want to be a little bit more budgetary friendly with an LCG, this one might be the way you go, because you don't have to buy everything to get the experience. You don't have to buy everything in order. You could buy what you are interested in. And I think that's a great way to handle something like this. And it was a big selling point to me of, I don't have to, I'm starting a couple years later after this is done. I don't have to go out and chase packs if I can't find them. If I can't find them, I'll go get something else. Maybe I'll find them later. Maybe I won't. But I'm not missing out on anything. It's not like, my game stops here and now I've got to, figure out what to do because a scenario is missing or something like that. And also, I do think that the cards themselves, the card play is still very interesting. It still attached. It still activates the kind of fun things that I like in an LCG, and the deck building setup is still cool and all that stuff. So I like all that. So I hope this was helpful for you. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. Whatever you play in the future, I hope you have a fantastic time doing it. Take it easy, everybody.